I grew up on Howson Road in Brockley in the late 1980s and early 90s. The house is backed onto a large wooded railway embankment and a train line, separating streets of Victorian terraces in Brockley from what was then known as the Turnham Estate to the west. I lived at number 112 with my mum, brother, dog and 2 cats. It was a house of New Age gatherings, fiddle music, cheap Bulgarian wine, and candle-lit rituals glimpsed through thick clouds of incense. A succession of lodgers completed our family unit. Students, rusters, recovered addicts, bodybuilders. At the end of our row of houses was a large cul-de-sac where local kids played football, graffitied, and made prank calls from a BT phone box. In my memory, the walk down to play football is always twilight. The feel of the scuffed football on my palms, the monolith of Canary Wharf, slowly rising, piercing the horizon with its pulsing red light. That cul-de-sac was known by generations of children as down the end. Its atmosphere was charged with the hum of an electricity substation and the intermittent rush of commuter trains beyond the chain-link fence that served as a goal for impromptu football matches. The dark silhouettes of trees of the railway embankment beyond seemed snared in tangles of brambles and ivy. That seemingly wild place between down the end and the hard boundary of the train tracks was always known to us as over the back. In the early days, a rusting 6-foot chain-link fence separated the cul-de-sac from the embankment. Slumping almost to the road, overburdened with fly-tipped sofas, mattresses, and illegally dumped rubbish of all kinds. Often an errant shot would send the football flying into the dark, knotted over the back, and the older boys would bully one of us youngsters into clambering over the barbed moor of broken household items and into the undergrowth to retrieve it. Those early transgressions over the back set my heart racing. I still remember ripping my hands and clothes on brambles, searching for the ball in my panic to return to the safety of down the end, relief reverberating from the slap of the soles of my trainers on the tarmac as I leapt down from the groaning fence. On one such excursion, I noticed a furtive path off into the undergrowth. Little by little, me, my brother, and our friends began to venture further and further over the back, till football was left behind in favour of exploring that ominous hinterland, radioactive with potential. As it turned out, that path was merely a capillary, branching into a complex network of crisscrossed veins and arteries through dense brambles and the beshadowed boles of ancient trees. Sedimentary layers of ruined dens and forgotten tree houses spoke of the lost bands of children in whose footsteps we were following. And in time we repaired and added to them, memorializing our own fleeting childhoods in rusty nails driven inexpertly through bark. As my childhood drifted towards its early teens, over the back became a kind of private kingdom, site of my first drag on a cigarette and naive attempts at tagging on the railway bridge. Yet no matter how familiar and safe it felt, it's always pregnant with the potential for sudden inversion, awakening to exert a terrifying grip on my imagination, sending me sprinting home, heedless of grasping briars. We moved to Texas before my teens arrived, house repossessed in the economic doldrums of the mid-90s. In my late 30s, I found myself, seemingly by accident, living on the opposite side of the tracks, only a few minutes' walk from my childhood home. As a new dad, I set out to explore my surroundings, while desperately trying to get my infant daughter to sleep in her buggy. It was on one of these walks that I found myself drawn down familiar paths until I stood at the top of my old street. I admit I hesitated to walk down it, but found my courage, and also a strange emptiness, as though this site of deep personal mythology had become inert, its half-life spent, or perhaps my own. Months later, on a wild and windy autumn night, stumbling home from work drinks, a little the worse for wear. Walking quickly, hood up, eyes down, I failed to properly register where I was until I noticed the familiar hum of the electricity substation. I was standing halfway across the road on the cul-de-sac. I was down the end, and the trees of the embankment bumped and undulated in the gale. Their leaves hissed, forming wild patterns in the amber glow of the streetlight, so that I found it hard to look away. Over the back seemed to rear up, monstrous, exerting a kind of vertiginous pull. I got out my phone and took a short video of the scene. And in viewing it all through the screen, that threat seemed to recede. But something remains, an unacknowledged pact made in that moment, perhaps to return over the back, to haunt its empty shadows in place of the next generation of children who will never walk its paths in this disenchanted and overprotected age.